This is Goku-san, DBZ, and welcome back for a new Best to Worst list. It's been about a couple months, so I figure it's about time. Today, ranking from Best to Worst that I own Nintendo 64 games. So with that said, music of choice today is the Village theme from Ocarina of Time. So with that said, total I have 18 physical in 64 games. I also have a bunch digital on the Wii U, but I am strictly doing what I have physical, ranking from weakest to strongest personal perspective, keep in mind. So with that said, first up coming in for me at number 18 of the 18 ranking. For me, weakest that I own, personal opinion though, to each their own. For me, first up is War Gods. War Gods, which was an interesting game that was, of course, produced by, obviously, Midway. This was the precursor to Mortal Kombat 4, where they were testing out and trying out the new engine that was going to be used for the first full 3D Mortal Kombat game. War Gods definitely has a lot of technical issues, being it was the first of its kind by Midway of 3D era games. But for that, it still has a little nostalgia factor for me. So, with that said, though it comes in lowest overall, it's just out of 18 games that I personally have, keep in mind. Next up, coming at number 17, is, speaking of, Mortal Kombat 4. Now, personally, Mortal Kombat 4 PS1 version would probably be higher ranked overall, or Mortal Kombat Gold on the Dreamcast, just because this is by far, in my opinion, the weakest of the three console ports of MK4. But though it is the weakest port, still I do like it for what it was, and I do think it's definitely a lot more solid and better than War God's overall gameplay. MK4 is a guilty pleasure of mine personally, but with that said, it is, in my opinion, out of the games I have, is definitely one of the weakest games, though. Next up, coming at number 16, is one of the few sports games I have. Coming at number 16 is NFL Madden 2000. Now, I'm not the biggest overall football fan, though there are a few selected teams I like. But with that said, Madden 2000 is pretty good. It's probably easily my favorite Madden game on the N64. But with that said, still, there are Madden games on, like, I would say the PS2 era, I think it's the best era of Madden personal perspective. I haven't actually played any Madden games past PlayStation 3, I think. But for me, this game does hold definite nostalgia, which is why it's obviously that I ended up getting it several years back. Just because it is nice from time to time to play a little bit of football on the N64, and this is by far my favorite on the N64 football games. Though I would say I probably like the most the 2K series on Dreamcast. Next coming in, next we have at 15 is arguably a game that's hated by many people, but personally I actually like it, and you will be seeing this in a future edition of Pickups. And that being Quest 64. A interesting JRPG game, to say the least, is one of the only JRPG turn-based combat system games actually on the N64. It makes it very unique in that aspect. There were very few JRPGs ever released on the Nintendo 64. Outside of this, about some of the only other games that really come to mind is Paper Mario, and then that Battle Ogre or something game, which I've never played. I've only ever played Quest 64, and I have a digital copy on the Wii U for the Paper Mario game, which is great. But admittedly, this is a guilty pleasure of mine. I know a lot of people who bash on this game, but I don't think it deserves as much hate as it actually gets. But then again, this comes from somebody who also defends as a guilty pleasure um, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. So with that said, yeah, I actually like the game more than a lot of people out there. Next up, coming at number 14, is the classic Command and Conquer. Now, Red Alert series is by far my personal favorite on the PS1, with Red Alert, and of course also Red Alert 3 on the 360 are arguably the ones I've played the most, though. I have actually played this probably 5 or 6 times. I've done full playthroughs of the game. It's not the greatest way to play Command and Conquer by far. I mean, obviously, Command and Conquer has always been more of a PC franchise, but still, I like for what it is. I like Command and Conquer on the 64. I love Red Alert on the PS1, Red Alert 3 on the 360, and I like many other tactical games out there, like Halo Wars 1 and 2. And I'm kind of looking forward to the actually tactical um, Minecraft game that's coming out. I'm actually very curious to try that. But yeah, for me, next up is Command and Conquer, as it's a series I've always had a soft spot for. Next up, getting towards closer now towards the middle of the pack, we go with arguably my favorite, more traditional, probably fighting game on the N64 is arguably Killer Instinct Gold. Yeah, it comes in like around number 13 or so, but with that said, I still like the game quite a bit. It would be, of course, the introduction, obviously, to Gargos, as you see him right on the cover there, which was basically just a standard gargoyle originally, and they made him way better in 2013 KI. But with that said, Gold still holds a special place for me personally, and it is arguably my favorite, like, more traditional fighting game on the N64 by far. Definitely, I remember best playing this game mostly with, like, Django, and also did enjoy also Tusk in the game as well. Now, getting to around number 11, gonna be curious to see some people's opinions. Somewhat controversial maybe, but for me, Pokemon Stadium is next up. Just shy of the actual top 10 list, of course. And with that said, actually, coming in, I guess technically number 12 actually, is Pokemon Stadium. But with that said, still a great game. It's just, it's better if you have the attachment and bring in Pokemon that you raise Pokemon team from like Red or Blue or, of course, Pikachu Edition Yellow. Which I need to get my hands on one of those attachment pack things, because it has been actually a while since I've played the original Pokemon Stadium personally. But with that said, still, I enjoy it for what it was, and the fact you could actually play the Game Boy games actually through the attachment stuff through this, which is kind of cool actually. Getting to play the handheld games actually on N64. That was a very interesting idea. I'm surprised they didn't do more with, personally. But with that said, for what it was, Pokemon Stadium is definitely a game that does have a heavy nostalgia for me out of Pokemon games. This is one of my favorites. Next up, just shy of the actual top 10 list, we are at Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. Comes in at 11. Now, for me, this game definitely has a very special place because this was my introduction to the whole story arc and storyline of Shadows of the Empire. This is what would get me to actually check out the comic book, Shadows of the Empire, as well as the novel as well. So I owe a lot of things actually to Shadows of the Empire, as it is, in my opinion, probably in the top 10, possibly best Star Wars games of all time. Keep in mind, to each their own. There's a lot of people who have not played this game that then means I'm not too surprised if a lot of people don't mention this game unless you've actually played it or remember playing the N64 remembers how big a deal this game was. It is arguably one of the most important Star Wars games on the N64. And then 64 did have actually a few great Star Wars games in my personal opinion. Now cracking the actual top 10. First up though is probably the most inferior version of the game to play. Still comes in at 10, as is my favorite game in the franchise. At 10 is, of course, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Now, in my opinion, the best way to play Tony Hawk was either on the Dreamcast or on the original Xbox with 2X. Though I played a lot on the PS1, it was mostly Dreamcast and Xbox were the versions I played the most. But for what it is, honestly, Tony Hawk 2 is definitely great. It is probably my favorite of the Tony Hawk ports on the N64 by far. Though then again, it's because Tony Hawk 2 is my favorite of the Tony Hawk franchise as a whole. Which has a lot to do with the fact with something great like the soundtrack. And that's where 2X on the Xbox is awesome. The fact you could play your own downloaded music on your Xbox onto the actual game itself, which is actually really cool. But this game holds a special place as it was my introduction to many great hard rock metal songs. Songs like Gorilla Radio, as well as the remix song of Public Enemy's classic song. Um, but the remix would also feature, of course, well, the song is called Bring the Noise, and it would also feature Anthrax, one of the big four. But with that said, it is definitely a game with a lot of good memories for me. Coming in at number 9, Star Wars Episode 1 Pod Racing, which is a game throughout the years, as I've stated, has a very heavy nostalgia for me personally. Though I love that they remastered the game and released it on modern consoles and limited run games, did a remaster physical run release for the PS4 as well as for the Nintendo Switch, and did even a re-release of the actual cartridge, same with Shows the Empire, which is actually really cool. This is arguably one of probably my top 5 favorite racing games of all time, up there with also games like Hydro Thunder or Need for Speed 3 Hot Pursuit on the PS1, and a few other like F-Zero on the Super Nintendo. There's definitely a few specific racing games that hold special place for me, and this is one of those special racing games. Next up, coming in at number 8, is a little game I'm sure most people know called GoldenEye. Now, for me, this was once upon a time higher up, still in my top 10 by far, of course, at number 8. Once upon a time, for many years, it was like in my top 5, but over the years, I tried other games and played other games a lot more, and I found more replayability on some of the other games. Plus, to be fair, this game is more designed for a local multiplayer in mind, which is what I played mostly back when I was a teenager and even to early 20s. But sadly, nowadays, like, I know no one who still has an N64, which kind of sucks. So, I don't really have anyone nowadays to play GoldenEye against. I only find myself very rarely playing the overall story in the game, though it's actually got some really fun missions. But still, sadly, it's a older shooter I don't find myself going back to as much nowadays. Coming at number 7 is WCW NWO Revenge, my second favorite wrestling game of all time. N64 produced 2 of my top, 3 favorite wrestling games ever. And this arguably being one of the big ones, but for me, yeah. Coming in just shy at number 7, I do indeed, still occasionally to this day, I will find myself popping this in and playing it for the nostalgia, For characters like, obviously, Goldberg, obviously, the NWO for life, if anybody remembers that. But with that said, still, I do remember, and some of the crazy characters, like from Raven's Flock and many others. Definitely interesting, which, of course, actually Raven is on the cover art, which I do find quite interesting. But with that said, speaking of just shy of cracking the top 5, coming at number 6 is WWF No Mercy. Easily my favorite wrestling game ever. Nothing will probably ever surpass it, or WCW NWO Revenge. But that said, great game, great roster of characters, plus the fact it had a character creative mode. This was really the first sort of like fighting game game that I know of that actually introduced a character creator. It was actually a halfway decent character creator. As in the game, I had a character created character I called, well, I created my own custom Dudley Brother character, which I actually think is still on the cartridge, weirdly enough. But with that said, this is a game I do find myself going back from time to time, playing career mode and everything. I just genuinely enjoy this, especially for it being from the Attitude Era is the big part for me. Coming in at Kraken now, officially the top 5. Coming in at number 5 is a game that really needs no introduction. Coming at number 5 is Star Wars Rogue Squadron. Arguably the best Star Wars game on the N64 by far. And of Nintendo exclusive Star Wars games, this is easily in my top probably 3 favorite Star Wars games ever of exclusives. Outside of this, I would also probably put up there, of course, Rogue Leader Rogue Squadron 2 from the GameCube being another one of them, besides Pod Racing. But yeah, for me, this game has a lot of great gameplay elements, and that's where this game excels, as well as its sequel, Rogue Leader. But with that said, this is a game that one of the few older Star Wars games I actually think holds up reasonably well, at least in the gameplay aspects. Obviously, in the graphics department, no. But in gameplay is where this game excels. Coming in at number 4, the original classic Smash Brothers. This game is definitely a game that does hold a special place. It is arguably one of my favorites of the actual franchise as a whole. It goes to the original, as well as, of course, my personal favorite, that being Brawl. I like Melee, but I don't like Melee as much as some people out there, but this is a game, though it has not aged the greatest compared to other, it's surprisingly still relatively good replayable. Of party-style games to me, this is great. This is arguably my personal favorite party-style game to play. Of multiplayer, like local play, this I like the most. More, because I never really got into the Mario Party series. Smash is the game that I prefer when it comes to multiplayer party type of games. And this is definitely a good one for just nostalgia, looking back at things. And still, it's actually still a very fun game that you can replay to this very day. Hard to believe it's been around since like 1998. Let that sink in. Coming in at number 3, needs no introduction, as the music is playing in the background from it. My third favorite N64 game of all time is, of course, or at least of the ones I have, is The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Now, personally, though it's only in more recent years I got to play on the GameCube and on the 3DS, I personally like Majora's Mask just a little more than Ocarina of Time. But still, this game definitely stands out from all the rest. Definitely for the time, though I have come to like several other Zelda games a bit more. This game still has aged relatively well, in my opinion. Definitely on the N64 of great action-adventure experiences. This is by far one of the best, I would say, adventure games that you can play on the N64 other than Majora's Mask. Though, if you don't like the darker, more creepy tone of Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time is definitely then probably more for you. This game is fun. It is a massive sized game for the time when it came out, and I cannot downplay the key importance and impact of this game on really adventure games moving forward. There's so many elements and things in Ocarina of Time that it took and just went way farther than any other games at the time. It is insane. Actually, pretty well how well overall gameplay wise, this game actually stands up even to this day is kind of crazy in my opinion. And arguably one of the best video game soundtracks of the entire decade of the 90s. That is where this game excels. Definitely in is the music department. It is easily in my top 3 favorite Zelda game soundtracks ever. Coming in at number 2. A game that I think is somewhat underrated. It is the successor to GoldenEye, and I think the far superior version to GoldenEye. That being, of course, the classic from Rare, Perfect Dark, which is a great sort of like dystopian, sci-fi, futuristic type world, which, funny enough, seems very similar to that of stuff nowadays. Now, especially the 90s was like a big time for like post-apocalyptic type like science fiction worlds and stuff. That was also big in the 80s as well. But definitely, this game is aged, I think, graphically and gameplay-wise, quite a bit better than even GoldenEye. This game is the true successor, and I think the story and everything and the setting is several times better than GoldenEye, though I love GoldenEye, don't get me wrong, it's probably still, in my opinion, made the best 007 game, but this game just takes everything GoldenEye did and takes it way farther, has a way more compelling story, and I absolutely love the main character of the game. I think it's cool, and heck, I'm a defender of the sequel to this. But with that said, number 1, there can only be one. Number 1, for me personally, favorite N64 game of all time. Star Fox 64. Star Fox 1 is arguably one of my favorite Super Nintendo games of all time, so it's no surprise. Star Fox 64 takes everything as Star Fox 1, and of course at the time unreleased Star Fox 2, and far excels, in my opinion, still remains the gold standard of the Star Fox franchise as a whole. I am one of those weird people, though, who actually still enjoy for what it was, liked Star Fox Zero, though I think the side game actually ended up way more fun and unique. But when it comes to a classic experience, Star Fox 64 is great, which is why I was happy when they re-released it on the 3DS, and of course I picked it up on the 3DS because it's Star Fox 64. Come on. It's an all-time great. I have played beginning to end on the original N64 version. This game I have probably beat over 20 times. That is how much I like the gameplay. Yes, I hate a certain frog pilot. I find very annoying, though it has definitely become kind of crazy iconic, the term do a barrel roll, as well as other characters and boss fights in the game, but nothing beats it. Is arguably, in my opinion, in the best jet playing games of all time, of jet fighter games I've played. This game actually holds up very well, maybe not in the graphics department, but in gameplay it is still pure, good, and golden, and it still reminds, in my opinion, the pinnacle of the Star Fox franchise. I'm sure there's people out there defenders of Star Fox Adventures and stuff, which I've actually not really had the honor of playing Star Fox Adventures, though I need to get around to trying the game if I could find the game for a reasonable price, but yeah. For me, at the end of the day, favorite N64 game is Star Fox 64, and that's just all there is to it. So with that said, what is your personal favorite N64 games of all time? With that said, I'll see y'all next time. Same YouTube time, same YouTube channel.